And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and we got some more Brothers War spoilers to talk about. Of course, some really interesting, iconic characters from the history of the game, which has sort of made me a little more excited about this set than most, because I like seeing especially the reiterations of these older characters. So let's get right into it. So first up, we got Thanos the Toy Maker. So a new iteration of Thanos, which is interesting. It's a blue-green one, though, which is really weird. So 3 blue and a green human artificer 3/5. Whenever you cast a beast or bird creature spell, you may copy it, except the copy is an artifact in addition to its other types. Wow, that is a very interesting commander with a lot of potential there. First of all, you are in beast and bird tribal. I mean, this is a little bit reminiscent of Volo, I think, right? Where you're a blue-green commander that when you're casting these creatures, you're creating copies of them. Of course, the copy becomes a token. By the way, just a rules clarification here. Just like with Volo, when you create, I shouldn't use the word create here. That's exactly the issue. You're not creating a token here, right? The copy of the permanent, whenever you copy a permanent, becomes a token. You're not actually creating one. Okay, the wording is very important there. So Parallel Lives does not work here, right? Because Parallel Lives says whenever you create a token, you create 2 instead. With Thanos, same with Volo, Parallel Lives does not work. You're not actually, like, the actual word create needs to be used there. And whenever you are making, I'm trying not to use the word create, whenever you make a copy of a permanent spell, it becomes a token, but you're not actually creating a token. So Parallel Lives does not work here, is what I'm getting at. Adrix and Nev, right? Same thing. That won't work here. However, I mean, beasts and birds, those are 2 really, really popular tribes in the format. Lots you can do there, without question. I guess you could just go good stuff, beast and birds here, and just find all the best beasts and the best birds. You know, I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head. I'm sure there's lots of great ones. You could do that. You also could do just birds. Like it would be very much in your best interest to pick one and go down that road. So if you just went with beasts here, you could put the other beast tribal stuff. There's not a lot, but there's a little bit. Birds, there's a lot more. And even with the birds, of course, because birds have flying, you could do flying tribal stuff as well. So it might behoove you to do just pick one rather than, you could do both, but it would be probably a good idea to pick one and just go directly down that route. But also they're artifacts as well. So you can also do the artifact tribal thing. I mean, the artifact thing, as I've already stated, I'm probably going to state this a lot with this set because this is a very artifact heavy and especially artifact creature heavy set. Artifact creatures are very susceptible to removal. Of course, it is going to be mostly a downside that the copies you are making are artifacts as well. However, there can be an advantage there, right? You can put stuff that gives boost to artifact creatures. You could put a Steel Overseer in here maybe, or something like that as well. But I think mostly the artifact stuff is going to be a downside, but still good. I think this is still a pretty fantastic commander and a lot of interesting things you could do with it. All right, moving on. And we have Tokasa Dig Site Mentor. And that, I'm not familiar with that name. I think this is, I mean, it's a character I've never heard before anyway. 1 green, white, and a blue human artificer 4/3. I imagine we're going to have a lot of artificers in this set. And, you know, I'm still waiting. There's a ton of artificers out there. I'm still waiting for a good artificer tribal card. And there really isn't any. One of my least favorite cards ever made, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, is Inventor's Goggles. I hate that card. It's terrible. It is the only artificer tribal card, the only card that cares about your commander being an artificer. And of course, artificers are always doing stuff just like Tokasa, right? Probably artifact stuff, whatever. And of course, what does Inventor's Goggles do? It gives your creature +1/+2. Why would you need to do that if your commander is an artificer, right? It's terrible. What couldn't they, like something else, right? You look at a card like Cloak and Dagger. If your commander is a rogue, it's a fantastic fit because it gives your commander, I think, +2/+0 and Shroud, which is great. That's a great thing to have for your commander. So card drives me crazy because they could have made a really interesting card there that could have been used in all of the artificer, like if your commander is an artificer, because it's the only card that helps artificers. So maybe in this set we'll have a little bit more because there obviously is going to be a lot of the artificer creature type. Anyway, Onto the card, it's a 4/3. Creatures you control have vigilance and tap surveil 1. So we have another surveil sort of tribal. There is a lot of support already out there for surveil, although a lot of it is in black, so you're not going to be able to use that here. Has a very expensive ability too. Green, green, white, white, blue, blue. So 8 mana. That's a lot. Exile Tokasa, dig site mentor. I mean, I know where this is going. We have a commander that is digging, and we have surveilling. So obviously this is going to be some sort of graveyard recursion, I think, right? Return any number of target artifact cards with total mana value 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Gee, I thought that would be better. It's actually not great. 8 mana for that? And you have to exile your commander? Oh, you exile it from your graveyard. That's almost worse. Because now your commander has to be in the graveyard, right? You can't do it from the battlefield. Yeah, that's worse. Because now, you know, having a card that has an ability from the graveyard in your commander deck is good, right? Like flashback or something. You can have it go to the graveyard, and then later in the game, when you have lots of mana, you use that ability. Your opponents probably aren't expecting it. They forgot about it. But this is your commander. You want your commander sitting in the graveyard for the entire game? No, you do not, right? You want your commander on the board so that you can use that first ability. Creatures you control have vigilance and surveil 1. So now you're going to have, when you want to use this ability, you're going to have a sack outlets in this deck. You're going to have to. Because now when you want to use that ability, when your graveyard's really full, you sack your commander, it goes to the graveyard, and then you can use this ability. I don't love it. I would have liked to see this ability just with, exile your commander and do this rather than exile it from your graveyard, which is kind of weird. Again, very weird for a banned card too, because now your commander is like coming back from the dead to do this thing. Very weird there. I don't know. Maybe there's a reason for that with the actual character. I don't like that ability the way they did it. So 8, you have to have your commander die, and then you have to exile it and pay 8 mana. So you're likely going to be doing this once per game. Probably won't be doing it much more than that. Return any number of artifact cards with total mana value. Now, the any number thing I say all the time is great, because that means, and I just did this with my AO deck. If you guys watch that video, this is what I figured out with that commander, because that is total mana value 4, but when it comes to artifacts, you can put all those zeros in there, so you get lots of freebies, right? With AO, you look at the top 7 cards. If you have 7 0 mana artifacts, you get all of them. Well, if you have 6 0 mana artifacts and then a 4, you get all of them because it's total mana value. So that part is good, and I think the reason, like, I'm looking at this, and it's very reminiscent of Nethroi, which is doing something very similar, but with creatures. The problem here is, and maybe people can come up with some combo-y stuff. That's what people are going to immediately look for, the combination of artifacts that cost mana value 10 or less and goes infinite. That's what everyone's going to do, guaranteed. Oh, people are probably also going to say Mycosynth Lattice. Sorry, Mycosynth Lattice does not make the cards in your graveyard artifacts. It only makes them colorless. A lot of people think that it does. No, it only makes the stuff on the battlefield in artifacts. Mycosynth Lattice does not work here. So there's going to be people thinking of the combos. And what, if I'm looking at this commander, what I'm thinking is, okay, I'm building my deck around creatures I control at Vigilance and Surveil 1. And that is all. Bad colors is really good for a top decking theme where I'm playing off the top of my library, which also works good as Surveil. The last ability, I don't know, like, I guess you could build around it if you want to do, I combo off the same way every single game, which I don't find to be very entertaining at all. Because now you also have to be on an artifact theme. Now you need to put a bunch of artifacts in your deck as well. And it's creatures you control at Vigilance. So now I need to put a bunch of artifact creatures in my deck. Or, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like the design here because I want lots of creatures in my deck so I can do the first ability, but the last ability cares about artifacts. So now I have to do a bunch of artifact creatures. And then I don't like how the last ability is exile from the graveyard either. I know people are going to think this commander is great because there's this combo that you can do. Okay, but what else? What else do you have? Like, I don't find a commander to be particularly great just because there's a combo out there that lets you win the game. To me, that doesn't make for a good commander. I'm looking at all the potential of a commander. I don't love this. I don't love it. Draftna, founder of Latinam, and that name is familiar. And when I first saw the Draftna, Like Latinam is obviously very familiar. Everyone knows that. Apparently, this guy's the founder of Latinam, so that's a big deal. And I'm like, okay, he's got to be somebody. So I looked it up. There is a card, Draftna's Restoration, is a card that references this guy. So he is sort of a big deal. All right, so 1 and a blue, Human Artificer Advisor, 2/1. Pay 1 and a blue, return target artifact you control to owner's hand. This set is so artifact heavy. Like I just said, like every legendary creature from this set is an artificer. It's ridiculous. Okay, so you're returning an artifact you control to owner's hand. Okay, a couple ways you can use that. Pay 3 and tap copy target artifact spell you control. Again, so we're doing that. The copy becomes a token, of course. I'm not getting super excited about this guy. Return target artifact you control the owner's hand. Obviously, that is there so that you can return an artifact you control the owner's hand so that you can recast it and then make a copy of it again. That's incredibly pricey for, because you have to pay 2 mana and then 3 more to copy it. So that's 5 mana. Is there combo potential here? Maybe. I honestly don't even like going down that road because now it's like, okay, we have this commander that doesn't look very good that, oh, well, there might be a combo out there. Yeah, but to me, that doesn't make it good. So, it's okay. There's a million better artifact commanders out there. However, I don't want to be that guy who's just like, oh, this commander's trash because there's a better artifact commander. I always want to look at the potential here. So what can we be doing with this commander that we can't maybe do with some of those other ones? When you pay 3 and tap to copy target artifact spell you control, that's not super great. And the reason why is because now the better the artifact I get, right? So if I get a Meteor Golem, there's an artifact that I want to copy, but it's going to cost me an extra 3 mana. Already cost me 7. That's 10 mana I have to pay to get myself 2 Meteor Golems, right? And if you're copying something small, just doesn't make a lot of sense. If I want to copy like an Ornithopter, Ornithopter's 0 mana, so I only have to pay the 3, but now I get 2 Ornithopters. That's not great either. Now I'm paying 3 mana for an Ornithopter, right? So whenever you have an ability like this, it sort of defeats itself almost, where you have what you need a Soul Ring or something. That's really the only thing where it becomes worth it, because now I'm paying 4 mana for 2 Soul Rings, which is pretty good. If I'm paying 7 mana for 2 Solemn Simulacrums, that's not super great. That's sort of like okay. 10 mana for 2 Meteor Golems is not great, right? So if you have something expensive, now you have to pay an absurd amount of mana to get 2 of them. And if you have something really cheap, now you're paying 3 mana for something that's not even worth 3 mana, right? So I guess being in the middle is where it's at. Casting something that costs 3 mana, essentially now you get 2 copies of it, might be worth it. So I don't know. It's not a great ability. I mean, maybe you just want to ignore that ability a little bit and just look at the return artifact you control to owner's hand. Maybe that's the ability you want to build around here. Now I can bounce my sad robot to my hand and just replay it again and get another land. Or now I can return my Meteor Golem to my hand and play that again. That might be where, so maybe you want to play almost like a Blink ETB artifacts theme here. That might be where it's at. I can return my Ichor Wellspring to my hand, replay that. So maybe that's probably where you want to go here. And the copy, you kind of do the copy when you can have the mana available to you. But that's, I guess, if I was building around this commander, that's where I would go with it. All right, moving on. And we have another, and I'm excited about this. Again, I want to build a colorless deck. So we have another colorless commander here, which is something that I'm looking forward to because I find it very challenging to build a colorless deck. Liberators Battlethopter. And this is actually a Thopter. Actually, you know what? Hope of Gearper is also the Thopter. So that's nothing original there. Okay. 3 mana, legendary artifact creature Thopter, 1/2. So it's a beefy Thopter, right? 1/2. Flash. Great to have flash on your commander. Flying, of course. You may cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash, which is, of course, Shimmer Mirror, but a little bit better than Shimmer Mirror because you're not just casting artifact spells, you're casting colorless spells, which includes, of course, Eldrazi. Is that how people are going to build this deck? They're going to fill it with, I can cast my Ulamog at instant speed. It's kind of neat. Some people might like that. Whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than Liberator Urza's Battlethopter's power, put a +1/+1 counter on Liberator. Oh. That's not bad. Okay, so whenever you cast any spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast it was greater than, okay, so if I cast an Arcane Signet, that is 2 mana, which is greater than Liberator's power, because it's a 1/2. I'm going to put a counter on it. That's pretty good. Next turn, I cast a Darksteel Ingot or something, right? Put another counter on it. So pretty easy to put counters on this guy. Again, now we're running into the situation where there's not a lot of +1/+1 counter support in colorless, right? Just made a video about this, about how certain colors do certain things. And when you're building around decks, it can be really, really important, right? So we don't get hardened scales here, right? We don't get Together Forever here because we're in a colorless deck, unfortunately. The Ozolith is really probably your only, for sure you're going to want to put that in here because, of course, your commander is very susceptible to removal. Other than that, not a lot of support. What's the build around here? This is basically, you just want to build a colorless deck. You can cast your stuff with Flash. You can cast your whole deck with Flash. Because you're in a colorless deck. So everything you put in your deck, you can cast with Flash. Pretty great. And whenever you cast a spell, you can also put counters on your commander and attack with it. Pretty good. Not bad. Anyone playing a Hope of Gearper deck, I think this is probably just straight up better, I think. So I think a lot of people who have Hope of Gearper decks are just going to swap this out because this guy's just better. Because a lot of people with Hope of Gearper, it only costs 1. A lot of people do Voltron with that. I think this is probably better, though, if you're just doing that strategy. Might be one. Again, this might be the, hey, now I get to build a colorless deck. I might actually do it. I like it. As a colorless commander, pretty good. All right, last one today. Felen Ronin Excavator. And, of course, Felen we've seen before. We already have a Felen of the Third Path. Pretty famous character in the game. 1 and a red human artificer again. 2/2 with haste. Felen Ronin Excavator can't block. So you want to be attacking with him? That's kind of weird. When Felen is dealt damage, exile that many cards from the top of your library. Choose one of them until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. Oh boy, okay. We're doing the Exile Tribal here. So we do have a decent amount of Exile Tribal support in mono red. There's definitely a few cards there I can think of off the top of my head. The can't block part is obviously so that you can't just chump with your commander and have it be dealt damage. The haste is a little weird because why would you want to attack with this guy ever? Your opponents aren't going to block, right? The haste is a little weird. Is it a flavor thing? I don't know. Weird. You want to deal damage to your commander. I just made a little while back a Zalto deck, the red giant guy that is venturing into the dungeon. There is a mono red deck that you have a commander that wants to be dealing damage to itself. So if you were thinking of building a Felen, could you swap them out? I don't know. Well, there's the dungeon mechanic that you won't be doing in this deck. If you want to build a Felen Ronin Excavator deck, go check out that deck tech because you could probably make just a couple of changes and you're good to go, right? Because I have all the, Pyrohemia, all those effects that are going to be dealing damage to your commander repeatedly, right? Whenever Felen is dealt damage. Now, obviously, your commander only has a 2 toughness, so you got to be careful here. I Pyrohemia, deal 1 damage to my commander, exile that many cards. So I'm exiling 1. Choose one of them. So obviously, because I'm exiling 1, I'm only choosing that one. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So we can wait until the end of our next turn, which is great. So I can pay 1 red mana on my opponent's turn. And then on my turn, I untap and I can go to town. That's extra good because now what I can do is, this is actually, the more I think about this is actually pretty good because of the wording. So what I can do, Pyrohemia is going to be the best card in this deck. It's the best card in any deck where you want to be dealing damage to your own creatures. And you're in red. So on my turn, I pay 1 red mana. I exile the top card of my library and I can play it till the end of my next turn. Then I go to my, and by the way, you get to see it. That's very important. So I've exiled a land. Okay, now I have a land. This is play, right? You may play that card so I can play lands. Great. So I see it's a land. So now I can play that land. I go to my next opponent's turn, and of course the damage goes away. That's why you want to wait until the next turn so you don't kill your commander. I pay another red mana, exile another card. It's a 3 mana spell. Okay, I can play that till my next turn, and I can play it right now if it's an instant. And you might want to put lots of instants in this deck for this reason as well. Now I can play it right now, right? The next turn I exile another card. It's the lightning bolt. I can cast that whenever I want. I can cast it right now. If I got my mana lying around, I can cast it right now. So on everyone's turn, I'm exiling cards that when I get to my turn, I can now untap and I can play all of them. I can play the land, right? And if you exile a bunch of, like if I exile a 7-drop or something, And it's like, oh, okay, well, I can't cast that, or maybe that's going to eat up all my mana. Maybe I'll stop there. I'll be like, okay, well, I exile the 7-drop. I can cast that on my turn, but I'm going to be tapped out, so I won't exile anything else because it'll just go to waste. So you can see what you're exiling, so you can choose whether to continue or not. Obviously, it would be ideal to look at more than one card. If I lightning bolt my commander, now I can look at the top 3 cards and I can choose one that I can play. But my commander now died, okay? So what you can do here is obviously increase your commander's toughness. There's, I'm sure, a few, I mean, Red's not super great at that, but there are obviously a lot of equipment that can do that. You know, like an Accorder's Shield would be good. 0 mana. I think it has equip 2 maybe. Maybe it's equip 3. And also giving an indestructible, right? So a Darksteel Plate will work here. You're going to want to make your commander indestructible because indestructible creatures still take damage. They're just not destroyed from it, okay? So giving your commander a Darksteel Plate means you can just go nuts, okay? And you don't have to worry about it dying. You know, Hammer of Nazan, all those, there's a few out there that are giving your commander indestructible. Again, you're in mono red. You don't have a ton of options there, but those are a few. This is pretty good. I like it. I like it. I'm like, oh, Exile Tribal, boring. But I like the way they did it here, where you actually have to put some... Again, you could just do the ideal damage, 1 damage to my commander on every turn, and then on my turn, I can untap and go nuts and cast all those cards. Or I can make my commander indestructible, you know, zap it, you know, cast a Blasphemous Act. Now I get to exile, the, you know, or look at the top 13 cards, choose one of them. You got to be careful here, though, right? You are exiling your library. Got to be careful there. You could end up decking yourself here if you're not careful. So you do want to be careful there as well, right? Pretty good commander. I like it. All right, that is all. That is it. 5 more really interesting commanders from Brothers War. Some better than others, I would say. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. But that's it for today, and thanks for tuning in.